Welcome to another G4 Guitar Teacher Hangout. My name is David Hart, and as usual, we're going to discuss topics around the teaching guitar and the business of teaching guitar. So I'm just going to jump straight in and ask the guys some questions and see what we come up with. So, Paul, did you have a question that you wanted to talk about? Anything?
I suppose the biggest one at the minute is hiring. So now I'm starting to think that that's kind of the next step. So a conversation on that would be good.
Yep, excellent. So do you have a specific question regarding hiring, or just generally want to know what the steps are or things to look out for?
I suppose more generally, because I'm kind of thinking about, I suppose, the ideal would be hiring someone internally, so a student that's quite high in maybe senior kind of levels.
Yeah.
And I suppose approaching that, because I've got a few teenage students, 16, 17, that are probably candidates that could be good to go for. Or is it best to also go outside and bring someone with more experience? So yeah, there's a few questions around that really.
Okay, we'll dig into it. We'll try and answer whatever questions. Talk about potential pitfalls, and I learned unfortunately the hard way. I made a lot of hiring mistakes over the years, and they're painful mistakes. Some mistakes are not so painful, but hiring can be a very painful thing, especially when you've got to let people go because you can't afford to pay them anymore because you got it wrong. But I'll get into that. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I've got Ben there, hiding behind our logo. Ben, any questions from you, particular topics you want to discuss today?
Could maybe do teaching older students. I had a group of two people in their 60s or 70s, and we've been moving quite slowly, and then one of them took in fact the slower of the two, took a 2-week break. It was a work trip, and then they came back and had one more lesson before 1 more week's break. And in that 2 weeks of not playing, we lost about 3 months of progress because of how slow we've been moving.
Okay, cool.
I'm not sure if I'm kind of setting expectations too low and that's allowed them to go so slowly, and if I should just say, that's a bit sloppy, but let's add another thing, and let's add another thing, until we get to stuff. Because as far as I know, they are both practicing quite a lot, kind of 4 to 7 half-hour sessions a week.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that because they are sort of a little bit different. They're a unique group. As people age, certain things happen in the way of learning. It's actually very good for them, but at the same time, the learning slows down, like everything else as you get older. It's just the way it is, unfortunately, until science comes up with a solution to it all. It's the aging process, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. And okay, so let's sort of jump in. We'll talk about what I want to do first of all. Actually, is open with Paul's open day. I just want to sort of go into that. We might have a session where we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it'd just be really good to talk about his open day. Spend 10 or 15 minutes just going over that, and then we'll jump into Paul's hiring topic, and then go to yours, Ben, after that. It seems us that only 3 of us here tonight. So, Paul, how many did you enroll at the end of the day?
Just before I mute my mic, congratulations, Paul. Nice work.
Cheers, Ben. Cheers. 37. So yeah, 37 enrolled. I'm going to have to quickly find my stats. I think 30, yeah. We got 32, I think, paid on the day. It might have been just under that through PayPal here, and then the rest paid the next day just through PayPal. So everyone had signed up and paid before the end of the weekend, which is, I thought, wow. And I think only one person didn't turn up. And last one I did was about 3, but we only had 1 no-show. And we had, I think, about 4 walk-ins of people just come off the street. And we had a couple, and Ben was just talking about older students. I think they're in their 60s, 70s, and they signed up even before the taster. They just walked on the street, pretty much. My wife must have charmed them because they just signed up, and they said, "Oh, we'll come back later and we'll give it a go." And they came back later, and they're, were great actually. Yeah, really. I think looking forward to it.
So where did you do it? The open day?
In my studio.
Okay. And so when you say they were just walk-ins, did they saw your ad or something? How did they find out about you?
I think it was a bit of both. I think some people, because I've mainly promoted it on Facebook and flyers at local schools. I think that's about it. And obviously on the website, But they were the two primary sources. I think some people saw on Facebook and then just came in, but there was a couple that I know just came off the street. I had a sign and my A board on the pavement outside, and I'm on the main kind of ring road around the town. So, you know, people go this way to get into the town, so it's quite a busy, populated street. I had a little arrow. Did I have an arrow? I think I had an arrow that points in, and I had "come on in" on the sign, which I think obviously let people come on in. Before I didn't have that, so we didn't have any walk-ins last year. So I think it was probably just it. Everything else on the post was exactly the same. All I'd had was "come on in," and I think that, you know, pushed people in.
It's amazing, and it's one of those things that often comes up in the marketing seminars that I go to. Is you have to give people specific instructions. You know, you have to give them an invite and tell them what to do next. And even though we think it's obvious, you know, most people or a lot of people don't see it that way. They don't see what we see. They see it as, okay, oh, this is an open day. Are we allowed in or what? You know. And I realise that when, you know, sometimes if you go around, you probably have them in the UK as well, where you have those open house, and you'll see a sign at the front that says open house. The difference of open house and open house, anyone can come in sort of thing, or, you know, public welcome, or, you know, it just makes that little bit of difference. It's an open house, but we're not really looking for a house. Are we allowed to actually step in and have a look, or, you know, is it invite only open house? What kind of open house is it? So yeah, I think that adding those little things, and on your website as well, adding little things that will make the difference to get people to take that next step. Excellent. So let me ask you this: compared to last year, what happened last year? How many students did you get last year?
There was, I think it was 22 came on the day, and we had 17 sign up.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, because I remember you saying, and it was still good. I remember last year. Yeah, that was a good result. But here, yeah, you've knocked it out of the park the second time round. So, are there any tips that you would give?
No, I thought Facebook was the primary source, which I think it was, but the flyers at schools, when my wife was chatting to the parents, a lot of them said they'd seen the flyer at school and then they'd seen it on Facebook or vice versa. And a lot of them said, oh, I got the flyer in the book bag. We were kind of thinking about guitar lessons, so we thought, oh, the school obviously trusts you, so we'll go with you. So I think we didn't do this many schools last time. I think we did a few, but we nowhere did as many as we did. You know, I have got stats somewhere, but I'm sure we did about 20 or somewhere around that. We did pretty much all of them, all the local schools. We spent about 2 or 3 days a week just travelling around, just walking in for a load of flyers. I'd say last time I think we did about a day, so we really pushed it a lot harder this time.
Okay, cool. And it would be really good as an exercise to work out the time investment that you did. So just sort of weigh it up to see how it compares to doing you know, normal flyers. And if you can get an idea of that, and because I'm all about those kind of numbers, working out how much time, effort, because everything's got a cost. Your time's got a cost. Or if you pay someone to do the flyers, it's got a cost, or go to the schools. So you've got to work out what's the best way to do this, and what's going to give you the best result. Where we had, you know, shopping centre, and I don't know that any of you guys have done shopping centres yet, but we did shopping centres, and they were huge. You know, I think I've mentioned this before, where, you know, we got 100. You know, in a couple of days, we got 100 people put their details down, and out of that, 30 of them actually paid and signed up for a couple of days. And, you know, didn't have to walk anywhere. They were all coming past us, walking past us. We shared it with another piano teacher, so it was about $1,000, so £500, and we split the cost, so half each. Plus, having someone else there to share the space with you allowed you to sort of take breaks, and they could watch, you know, especially during the quieter times. But I would highly recommend it to sometimes spend the money to be in front of the people, but you do need to have the right personality. You know, I know the difference between the different people that I put up there. If I put someone who was sort of quiet and shy and not willing to talk to people, then we wouldn't get any email addresses. But if you put someone there who's really, we had this one guy, and he was fantastic because he really loved guitar and he loved talking about it, and loved singing and playing guitar. So he was constantly, attracting people in. So you got to have the right person, and it's the same with anything. You can't just put on something. It's like a club or a pub putting on entertainment. They have to put the right act on if they want to increase their takings. They can't just put anybody on. It's not just the fact of putting someone on. You've got to put someone on who's actually going to capture the attention of the people there. I think it's great. I think. Do you think the branding was any different this year? Did you have more posters, or did you design it any different?
Fun enough, it was less. Last year, I did it, or even back in March, I did it through Learn to Play, which is a nationwide event that the National Instrument Association of Instruments puts on, what they're called.
Yeah.
So I had them backing me, so they sent me loads of flyers, they sent me loads of leaflets, they got me in the national press. They got, they were in the Tesco's magazine and the local supermarket, kind of national magazines. So it was it was a big event, but yet, like, obviously the numbers were a lot smaller. So they kind of showed me this year that we could do it locally a lot bigger than they could do it, obviously, having them behind us and being on their big website and Rock School behind it and, all these other big kind of brands.
Yeah, excellent.
So I was quite surprised by that. But no, the branding was pretty much the same. Flyers, the only thing that changed with Flyer, I dropped the Learn to Play logo. I used smaller flyers. Last time I used slightly bigger ones. I think it was A6 this time, just like normal. I used slightly bigger ones last time. That was kind of it. Yeah, it was very similar. I think it was just a bit harder. The schools, I think, was one of the big ones. Facebook, I did invest a little bit more money, but it still wasn't huge. I think it was £100 in the end. It wasn't massively.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it sounds to me, I mean, the thing that's standing out for me is the schools. It sounds like that was really the difference, and that's a big takeaway because I never purposely targeted schools. I never really did a lot of effort with schools, and hearing that from you is just something new for me, which is great. My approach with schools was more of a stealth approach, and that was where I would go to schools and what I would do is I would go through my students, where I'd say to my students, spread the word through your school. Or just sort of make examples of them to talk to other kids at their school or talk to their teacher or whatever. Just these kind of, stealth methods of doing it rather. But I did give them things like gift vouchers and that for their, fundraisers, whatever they had on, just so that they knew who we were, and they'd stand up on stage and say, hey, this was brought to, this prize is from G4 Guitar, you get 5 lessons. It didn't cost me anything other than time, and it got me up in front of the whole school through fundraising, which I think that you should definitely do, because the schools are always looking to raise funds and it costs you nothing. You just say, here's 5 lessons and come along. Okay, cool. That's great, and I think we'll probably talk about it more, but I think that sort of gives us the main thing, that the takeaway is that you went out and you're proactive, and you're especially proactive with the schools. It sounds like you're very organised, and you are generally very organised, Paul. I think you're really setting a great example. When I see pictures of your studio and the things that you do, you seem to be organised. Either you are very organised or you put on a great front. Either way, it's good. It doesn't matter. As long as the perception is there, it's all good. So let's move on to your other question about hiring. And what I'll do is I'll just throw in a couple of things quickly about hiring, and then I'll get you to sort of elaborate on what you want, the questions that you want to ask. So I think that, and I'll just go for the big one, the 80 of the 80-20, if you like, of hiring, and that is that the mistakes, and this is exemplified in the E-Myth, where we talked about hiring Harry. I might just, Bob, just see if I can mute you there. Can you mute your mic, Bob? We're just getting some noise coming through. That'd be great. Excellent, thank you. So in the case of the hiring process, what I find a lot of the problem is that we hire when we're at that point where we're kind of overworked, we've got a lot happening, and so we just want to get the first person who comes along. and as I think he calls it this, we basically we're not delegating, we're abdicating the position, and so we more or less go, there you go, you do all that now. And we do it with teachers. It feels easy with a teacher because we just say, well, here are the students, you know how to play guitar, you know what it's all about, here's the G4 method, go and read it on the website and good luck. And then we find the problems start to creep in. And the things like the teacher will say to you, rather than, and I've obviously been there in this position where the teacher will say to me, look, group lessons don't work, and they kind of trying to tell you how to run your business. And what they're really saying is that I don't have any experience or training teaching groups, therefore I'm concluding that they don't work. So you then are put in this position where you try and convince this teacher who's already, you know, set their mind on how they view and it doesn't necessarily have to be the group teaching, it could be the system of teaching, it could be the way that you operate, and then what happens is that they start to want more money, and they want more money because they feel that they're not really getting what they're not getting. It's a subconscious thing often. They're not getting training, they're not getting enough support because you're busy, you're doing other things, and so we end up in this position where we've got this unhappy teacher employee. And I'm telling my own story here, and then next thing you do, you're trying to pay them a little bit more to keep them happy, and then they're still not happy, and you end up having to let them go, and as a result they're not happy, they get angry, but you also end up with collateral damage with your students, where students drop out. We had this one teacher who I use as the perfect example in this case. He was really good at connecting with the students. The students really liked him. He didn't have any problem in that area, but he totally refused to follow policies or use the method, or you know, he just ran his own show completely. He was his own entity. And so what I was actually, I'd been overseas, and I came back and I said to him, look, it's not, we play as a team. This is where we all work together, and we need to be all on the same page, because if you teach something different to what we're teaching and then a teacher has to take over from you, or somebody gets sick or whatever, the students are totally confused. And he said, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I don't buy it. You know, and I have my ways of doing things, and you know, if you want me to teach, then this is the way that I do it. And so it was that kind of position where I said, look, unfortunately, it's not going to work unless you. And I'm telling you now, you have to follow what we do, because that's what you hired, and you agreed to that when you decided to work for us. Anyway, he quit, which was okay. And then what he did is he opened a guitar school in the very next suburb, very close, and put up a website and copied all our stuff, and did very, very similar kind of approach in his marketing, and even the way that he sort of put it all out there. But because the students really liked him, we had this where a lot of students defected and went to him, and there were other students who were very disappointed, and even felt that we had that I was this really bad guy that had come in and taken away this really great teacher from them. And I had to sit down with some of the students and parents and say, look, unfortunately, I'm not saying he wasn't a good teacher. He just wasn't. He wasn't willing to do what our system, and that's okay. But I didn't sack him. He left. That was his choice, and it was his choice based on. And we have a system and a method of teaching you that we believe in, and we want to give you that. And most of them understood, but it was a lot of work and a lot of stress, and we lost students and everything. And it was all because we didn't hire him properly from the beginning. We just took him on, and without really looking closely at him. And he wasn't the only one. I'd done this several times before I really woke up and learnt that you need to go through the whole process of hiring. And that's why on the G4 Method site, it's quite long and it's quite detailed. And if you follow the process, you're going to have very few problems. Okay. So Paul, I'll let you jump in with questions and anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I've been thinking about it. Yeah, trying to get someone that's not already perhaps been teaching for years, set in their kind of way. I think that's a problem with a lot of individual teachers, isn't it? Like you say, they're not following a method. They kind of build the lesson around the student. And as you said, schools I've taught in, all the teachers do that, so then there's no unified image of the school because everyone's doing something differently. So, you know, one person gives a school a bad rap because they do it badly, but then another teacher in the next room is great because, you know, he's just a great teacher. So yeah, I definitely, yeah, it's finding the right person.
You want a band, you don't want, you know, a star, so to speak, you know, because the star, as soon as the star leaves, your band's finished. You want, and you can see this. You know, I use sport as an example. If you look at often the best sports teams, they're the teams where you have, you know, a couple of stars. They might be able to beat, you know, an average team, but when they come up against a real team, people who work together as a team, it's very hard to beat a good team. You know, even if you have some stars on the other side, and it's the same within your business. If you've got these stars, then they're not playing for the team. They use the term. There's a term used called crowning the company, and that's where you detach yourself. And I do this with G4. That's why I talk about G4 as a separate entity. I don't talk about it as me. I'm G4. I talk about G4, as you guys know, and the idea is that G4, I've crowned the company. We're all here to do it in you know, what's best for G4, because if we don't look after G4, it's like a ship, it'll sink and we all die. So our first priority is to look after G4, and it's the same within your teaching school. The first priority is not you personally, Paul, it's the business, because the business looks after everybody. So yeah. Okay, cool. Did you want to? Yeah, go.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say the biggest, I suppose, questions are because in my head I was always thought when I hit 85, then that's a good place to start looking and start bringing people in. So when I hit 100, I then have someone to start. You know, then students over 100, I can give to them or start giving them some of my students. So that's a kind of an accurate or good way to kind of approach it.
Yeah, pretty much. That's about where I was. I was in the 80s. Yeah, I think I was about 87 students. So. Pretty well spot on. 87 students. I brought in a teacher, and I felt that was the right time because it was just building, and I knew that the momentum was either going to get stifled or you know, like of the business, or I was going to burn out, one or the other, if I didn't bring in someone. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's good.
Sorry then. I was going to say, should we get a good one to try and look, obviously, internally first, rather than trying to, you know, promote externally. You know, ideally, if I can get a student that has gone the G4 method and is obviously fairly, you know, good skills, then I see that's probably the best option.
I've seen, you know, because I did martial arts, Chinese boxing and stuff when I was in my teens, early 20s, and what I found was that system worked really well. Most of the loyal instructors were ex-students or still current students of the master, so to speak, and there's something in that because there's this you know, loyalty and belief and understanding in what the master is doing. And so if you you know, in your case, if you're able to find a student within your ranks that is a suitable teacher, I'd definitely go that path first. But again, put them through the process. You know, don't just give them that position because it's easy or you think that they're a good student and deserve it. Being a good student is not necessarily being a good teacher. So I would bring them in slowly, you know, kind of like an apprenticeship almost, to say, look, let's just go through the process and be honest with them and say, there's no guarantee here. I need to know that you've got what it takes, so they feel that they're earning it and working through each of the levels, and not that you feel you owe them in any way.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to crowning the company. Is that what's best for your business? You know, it's not about doing favors for students or friends or anybody. And this is a mistake my mother made. Quick history on my mother's business. When I was a teenager, she was absolutely broke. You know, actually a bit younger than 10. I was about 10 or 11. My parents had sort of divorced when I was about 7, and she'd struggled for a while, and then she started this business based on my auntie doing it, and she did really well because she's great with customer service and you know, really good with people and all that sort of thing. So we went from, you know, living in a very poor, low-class, bottom-end suburb of Sydney to moving to this very wealthy suburb. You know, she was turning over like $1 million a year back in the 80s, and so we were like, whoa, this is just some weird trip that we were on. She was going from broke to millionaire, but what she did is she then expanded into more locations. She ended up with 3 stores, but she did everybody favors. So she was giving jobs to relatives and friends of friends, and then she ended up getting really stressed, and I just saw it all fell apart. And that's because she surrounded herself with people she was doing favors for who weren't actually doing her any favors, and that was the problem. And it became very, you know, to sack someone who is a friend or a friend of a friend, it becomes very personal. You know, it's no longer, and so she wasn't serving the company. She, like I said, she didn't crown the company. She was looking after friends, and she's a very generous person. So she was kind of helping people out that were in trouble. You know, needed a job, needed some money, so she would sort of help them out. But it just, yeah, it was an absolute disaster. It cost her wealth, basically. Yeah, cool. So the steps to go through for hiring, or some of the things to think about, even if you're going to hire internally, externally, it's all the same as far as the process is concerned. What you want to do is get at least 5 good candidates. And what I mean by good candidates are people who have done if you go to the hiring section of the G4 site, they've actually done the online quizzes. So they've been through those 3 stages and done each of those quizzes. And then you do a Skype interview. So don't even bring them in. You don't need to invest a lot of time in people. What you do is they go through that quiz, and then you do the Skype chat. And when you find 5 people that you think and I recommend doing it very short, just 15 minutes, no longer, because if you sort of plan a half an hour, so to speak, for an interview with someone, and you get 5 minutes into it and realize, no, this guy's got an axe in one hand and a syringe in the other, he's definitely not the kind of guy I want to hire. You don't have to go very long. You know, it's not going to sound like you've just, you know, gonged him. You can sort of quickly wrap it up and go, all right, that's great, really good. Thank you for your time. And it doesn't get personal. It's 15 minutes is not long enough to really get personal with someone. It's just like they get a look in and that's it. And you say to them as well, you say, look, we've got quite a lot of people apply for this position. We do very short interviews, just 15 minutes, and then yeah, we'll call you back if you know, if we decide that you're up for a second interview. And so 15 minutes, it doesn't use much as your time. You get a bit of a feel for who they are in that time. It's enough time, and then you can decide whether or not to get them in for a proper interview into your school. So if you go through those 3 stages, the quiz, you'll find a lot of them won't even fill in the quiz. You know, getting 80-20 again, 80% of them won't even do that. So you'll get 20% who will fill in the quiz, and then out of that, you know, some of them won't turn up for the Skype interview. I found about, you know, 80%, if you like, sticking to the 80% rule here. But I found most of them turned up for that interview, and the Skype interview, and then, you know, the couple cancelled, decided that it was a bit too formal for them or whatever. And then out of those ones, you know, most of them were okay and were good enough to do the other interview. And what we did, and again I recommend, we did this recently with Joachim in Sydney, where we brought them in. I wasn't there. This was Joachim and Michael, I think, brought them in and did a group interview. And that way, you bring them all together at one time. So you see them all together at one time, and you don't have to spend a lot of time. You can bring them all together for an hour, you know, a little bit longer if you like, and have them all there at once, rather than doing all these interviews where it's going to take you, you know, you've got 10 people. And you spend, you know, 40 minutes, so you've got to allow an hour. Even if you do half an hour interview, you've got to allow a bit of downtime. Rather than taking up all of your time, then you just bring it all together, bang, okay, who's the winner? And then just decide from there. That's pretty well, that's really the hiring stage, which is to me is the critical part. And then, of course, you need to do your part after that in following up with the training, which I know you will. Treat an employee just like you would a student. Give them the same care and attention that you give to your best students. And in fact, I would take them even a level higher, because your employees are more important. I know it sounds funny, but they're actually more important than your students, because they are looking after your students. If you don't get good employees, if you don't get the employee teacher right, then it's just going to trickle down into your students. So yeah, you need to really, really look after your teachers, but they need to know the rules as well. So there's a balance. It's kind of, you know, a two-way street. They have to play by your rules, but they also have to be looked after and respected and taken care of. Any other questions on that for now?
I think that's good. A lot to think about and kind of start the process.
Okay, cool. The only last thing I'd add there is that what you're looking for is not just a teacher. You're looking for your first manager. Okay, you're looking for that person who is going to be able to train your future teachers as you grow and grow. You want people who can. You don't want to train every teacher who's coming through there. You're the entrepreneur, and we need to get to remember that your role is the entrepreneur, and when you bring in that first person, you really want to work with them, train them up, get them ready to train the next person, and then the next person, and so forth. So you now have one key person that you deal with, and that's how you want it. You want to think of your business from almost, the point of a pyramid where you're on the top, and then you maybe have one or two people who come off there that you work with, and then they have their people who come off them, and so there's not all this sort of cross interacting with it. And, you can make yourself approachable, but you really anyone can come to you, and I was like that. Anyone who worked for me, I was approachable to any of them. They could email me, they could Facebook me, they could organise a meeting with me if they wanted to, but their direct report was the manager, not me. So. Okay, cool. So, Ben, teaching older students. So, Ben, let's recap on that again. You've got 2 students, is that right? And their ages 60s?
60s, maybe early 70s.
Okay, cool. All right. And so, is there a particular challenge that you're having with them?
I probably. I might be able to narrow it down to a few specific things. What I've mostly been doing is, at first I was going through the skills as I normally would, and I was like, this isn't quite sticking. Let's start spending a bit more time on each one, which meant that the other ones were being forgotten by the time we came back to them. So my next step was ignore some of them, and I focused almost exclusively on the scale for about a month, and that got them, they could memorize the scale. The main problem with that scale was reading it in order. They would ascend fine, and then when they started coming back down, instead of descending the notes, they'd descend the strings but ascend the notes on each string.
Right.
And every time in the lesson, it wouldn't take long to get them playing it correctly, and then we'd play it correctly for maybe 5 minutes, and I'd make a few pointers about kind of thumb position, finger position, that kind of stuff. But it would be 5 minutes of actually working on that scale, doing some of the at-bats, as Douglas says. But when we'd come back the next week, it would almost always be going the wrong way. So I think that's pretty much sorted now, by writing some notes on some extra printouts and stuff like that. So now I'm bringing in the reading a lot more. And I've actually bought another book, The Guitarist's Way, which is what I learnt on, because that goes from G up to G, and we're going E, F, G, then down to B, C, D, then G and A. So by combining those 2 reading things, I think this will make a big difference. One of the 2, remember I said one of them went on a 2-week holiday, had 1 lesson, then had a lesson away?
Yep.
Those were the last 4 lessons, so he'll be back for one this Wednesday. And in that gap, the other one, she's been doing fantastically with that new book. So going through The Guitarist's Way and the new G4 exercises, she's really getting the hang of the reading, and from there, I'm going to start just writing out. In fact, that's related to one of the things on one of their recent emails. Yeah. I'd like to know a bit more about copyright, so I know what I'm allowed to write out as a song. For example, can I write out Happy Birthday now? Can I write out Twinkle Twinkle? That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just some basics that get them practicing the notes would be great.
Yeah, because there, I mean, there are. I think there's a website. Well, no, there's a website where you can go and find all the songs that copyright free now. That so basically the copyright's expired or they didn't have
I
a
have
copyright in
actually
the first
found a
place.
site called Public Domain Songs, and I made a list of the ones from there. But I'm wondering if there's a bit more legal, a definite thing I can do rather than here's a website someone made. They got the domain Public Domain Songs, but that doesn't mean that they know anything about the legality of writing down or recording.
Well, for education purposes, you can use 10% of the song for educational purposes without infringing on copyright.
Fantastic. So on a real song, that's easy to work out. How about with something like My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, where everyone knows
That's
the
no
first...
longer under copyright.
Sorry?
That's no longer under copyright. There are certain arrangements of it that are, but the melody itself isn't.
Brilliant.
It's-
If I choose that as an example and we'll pretend that was under copyright, everyone knows the first verse of that, but very few people know even that there are kind of maybe 10 verses to that.
Yeah.
In those situations, am I allowed to use the first verse, or is that
Sure.
because that's the
Yeah.
only well-known bit?
Yeah, well,
That's-
firstly, that song is no longer under copyright. There are arrangements of it that may be, but the melody itself is not. The only thing you can copyright in a song is the melody, the arrangement. Okay.
Yeah.
Chord
Fine,
progressions are not copyrightable. So
Yeah.
you can take a chord progression from any song and use it.
Yeah.
Only certain arrangements of songs are copyrighted, not the total song itself. Like, for example, a certain copyright for Happy Birthday is now gone, but there is an arrangement that is still under copyright. But again, for educational purposes, you can use 10% of the song without being infringing on copyright. You can also use a song for what they call fair comment, with a fair comment clause in copyright. So if you were to write an article analyzing a song, analyzing a melody or a progression or an arrangement, you can use excerpts of that song as long as you're doing fair comment on it.
So even if it ends up being in total more than 10%, as long
Yes.
as you...
It's under fair comment, under the fair comment clause.
Which I could basically read as analysis.
Yes. So you could take an entire song, do an analysis of it, talk about its structure and its arrangement and its production qualities and all these other things, and put excerpts of the song in the article, on the web, and you're not infringing on copyright because you're doing this under the fair comment clause.
Cool, that's pretty interesting. I won't be using that obviously when I'm writing down melodies for songs, but
Yeah, but even if you wrote it down, you wrote out the melody and you wrote comments about it, that's fair comment, even if you exceeded the 10%.
cool. That is very interesting.
Good to know. Good to know. It sounds. I mean, Bob knows this stuff well. I think partly because he's interested in it, but also your wife's does this. Is that right?
My wife's an international business attorney. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dealing mostly in intellectual property. So.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's
So,
really
yeah.
appropriate.
Yes, Bob is the man to speak to in this regard. So that's great. Thank you. That's excellent.
Bob, how would you feel about me just emailing you the list of songs and you can just tell me which ones you're certain of that I'm fine to use the entire thing, the entire melody?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks very much. I'll send you that list now then. Do you mind popping your email in the chat?
How do I do that? Let's see. Just send it to bobralston@gmail.com.
Awesome. Will do. Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
Excellent. Yeah, and if you get stuck, you can just get it in the Facebook group.
Yeah. Great.
That's great. And look, one of the things that I think is not being sort of talked about and capitalized is that I've noticed this is one of the things I've noticed missing in some of the videos I've been watching is that there's not enough skill to songs connection. There's a lot of the teachers are teaching the skills but without any reference to songs, and I think maybe I didn't talk about it enough in the training. Maybe I've sort of put too much emphasis on the skills, and that's something that I'm sort of becoming aware of. But even though it's a skills-based program, and G4 is all about getting those skills right, I was always weaving in songs and bits and pieces wherever, and I would listen to top 40 songs. I would listen to TV themes, whatever, and I would pick out little bits and pieces and use those as examples all the time in the songs. I was listening to a song for my daughter just the other day. It's like a top 40 hit, and it's using a major pentatonic scale, and it's actually almost running the scale as it is pretty well through the notes of the major pentatonic scale. And so it's a great example, and it's a very popular hit at the moment, and I think it's called On My Mind, or On My, something like that. And what's that?
My Girl is like that. It runs the scale, pentatonic scale.
Yep.
Bum, 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 bum. That one.
The major pentatonic, right. Cool. Yeah, and so yeah, there are if you listen to the pop songs, a lot of really good musicians play on these songs. These are, even though whether you like the artist or like the song or whatever, it doesn't really matter, because behind often these artists are some very, very talented musicians, and some of the little guitar things that they do are very clever, and they can be often they're really good to throw in your lessons and throw these little bits in, because people recognize them, especially the young kids. They hear it and they go, oh, I know that. And you can say, well, yeah, well, that's the major pentatonic, or that's the minor pentatonic, or it's a, whatever. So I think that's something that I noticed that needs to come more into the lessons, where we may even need to build up a bit of a library of this, where and if we're playing by the 10% rule. In this case, what I was working at for my daughter certainly fits into the 10% rule, because it's only in that first, I think, 20 seconds of the song, or 10 seconds even of the song, that this sort of riff is there. And these could be things that you could build up a real library that could be used when explaining each and every skill. And I think if that would make every skill more relevant in that sense. So.
I don't know if I made it clear in that email, one of my recent emails to you, David, but that's one of the things I hope to do. Yeah. I'm not sure how everyone else would want to do it, because it could be quite time consuming based on what I'm planning on doing for my students. I can do it because I've got less than 30, but if Paul's getting to 85, it's going to be troublesome. But I'm taking a scan with my phone of their ultimate song list, and then just listening through it quickly, going through each one, maybe looking up tabs from if it'll be quicker than me trying to work it out orally, and just making sure I know what's relevant to each song. For example, in You Shook Me All Night Long, I could say it's got the S1 chords, it's got a bit more complex rhythms than the S1 kind of eighth notes. You can get a little bit more trouble with the rests, but putting it into checklist levels for each skill, and then without even having to use the whole song, I can say this song is good to practice these chords. Just wanted to check though, are you saying that you demonstrate the skills and songs together and then go back to doing some standard up and down the scale practice? Or are you saying, I might say, here's an example of it, and we're going to learn that example from the song as a way to practice?
I don't teach them the pieces, I use them as an example.
Okay. So playing My Girl, you'd play it to them, and then you'd play the major pentatonic up and down and up and down and up and down.
Exactly. Then and especially when you can get examples that are very close, so it actually sounds like the scale. You start off by showing them the scale, and then you demonstrate the song, and they, oh, that's that song, and you can see them, their eyes light up, or they acknowledge the fact that it is something they're familiar with, and then you say, can you see that that's the scale applied to the song? And if they say, can we learn it? Well, you are learning it because you're learning the scale. If you want to learn exactly how it goes, then that'll take a little bit more work. Or, in the case of this song that I'm talking about, it's got a little bit of syncopation in it. So, it's not going to be for a beginner student in that sense, but it's not that far off. You could certainly teach it, but we don't want to get too sidetracked to where we're teaching all these bits and pieces of songs. But I'm even talking about, one bar things where you can find songs. If you're talking about Shook Me All Night Long, that song alone has, probably half a dozen little snippets that you can use as examples to demonstrate certain skills, etc.
Cool.
Excellent.
Good.
Yeah.
I don't know how the database going, but I'm happy to try and get it going if everyone else wants to add whatever they can.
Yeah, look, I think if you come up with something and if you're working something out, just throw it up and say, does anyone else know this, before you go to too much trouble. Someone else might have already tabbed it out, or might know exactly how it goes. And if we could even get to the I think a really great thing to do is in this particular song that I'm talking about. I think it had something like 60 million views, and I went and looked at it on YouTube for the guitar. Someone teaching the guitar. Nobody's done it. There's nobody who's taught this guitar riff at the beginning of the song, and so there's a beautiful opportunity there to do a lesson on it, and maybe get a lot of hits for a video. And if you're doing lots of these, you'll occasionally will hit the mark, especially if you're tagging very popular artists, because that way it'll come up under those particular artists, and some people will want to learn to play it, but also they can be used for your students. So you can give your students that particular video and go, well, if you want to learn that, here's a video where I'm doing it. And you can
value if we did that with checklist-based songs, so we can say you can play this section of this song at this level, and even you can play the entire song when you reach this checklist level, because you've done it all here, and then you've done the other stuff here, and you've done the other stuff here. Now you just put it together.
Exactly. Matching real songs with what we're doing, and you just follow whatever your particular interests are. But with quite a lot of us doing it, we would build up quite a collection. You don't realize how quickly things build up. Like, just so you guys know, this is number 78 in these videos that I've done, with you guys in these Hangouts. So we've got, most of these Hangouts go for an hour at least. Some of them can go a little bit longer. So there's like 80 hours there that's just accumulated over time, and the same happens if you start doing it, especially if you like doing it, if you like working out songs. And I was reading how Guthrie, one of the reasons he got so good, he's passionate about guitar, of course, but he used to work out songs all the time. That was what his job was. He was working for one of the magazines, I think, in the UK, doing all the tabs. Sorry?
That's transcribing, but yeah, that's what
he was transcribing. Yeah, that's right. So through transcription, he became really good at playing because he was constantly transcribing everybody. He's already probably a good player anyway to get the job in the first place, of course. But his story was that doing that all the time really got him honing in on, because he had a reputation to protect, so he wanted to make sure he got everything right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's jump into back to these older students. The thing that I would really, it sounds like you pretty well answered your own question, and you got it under control anyway, but the only thing I would say is that when I find that students were forgetting things, like you're going through the skills and you come back and it's like, well, we've done this last week and you can't remember it, whatever, it's generally because they're not practicing it. And sometimes you've got to call them out on it in a nice way. We don't want to be the nasty teacher, but sometimes you just got to say, guys, you're really important that you go and practice this, because if you don't practice it, you will forget it. And if they and say to them, look, if you can't remember, if you get home and you can't remember it, then have a video that they can see. If you can see
every lesson that they can watch back. So, in fact, the guy who went away on his holiday, I think normally the way he was practicing was only ever playing the video, playing along.
Right.
So obviously he's got a lot of time in that video where he's listening to me talk. Well, not a lot of time. Most of those lessons aren't too much new stuff. It's going over the same stuff. But there's always less efficiency of practicing in the lesson than when you're just, I know exactly what to work on. I will work on that now, then this, time's up.
Yep. And we want to make sure too that, obviously I didn't use video when I was teaching, and I made sure that in the lesson that they understood what to do. That's
what I'm going to that stuff. I'm like, make sure they can, and now I'm going to say less, and now I'm going to say nothing. Yep, still doing it right.
Yeah.
Next week, what happened?
And look, I know with some of the older students, and I've had to some of the younger students for that matter, it's in one ear and out the other. I know that happens, so it's definitely. But if you notice a trend there, and you know it's happening a lot, then yeah, you kind of sometimes you got to really bring it down to where you're teaching them 2 notes of a scale, and just say, all I want you to play is C D this week, all week C D. Just do that for me, because you know last week I gave you 5 notes and you can't remember them. So this week I'm just going to give you 2 notes. That's all I want you to practice, and come back to me next week, and then I'll give you the 3rd note. How's that sound? So that you really bring it down to wherever they're at, whether it's a case of them, you know, being overwhelmed by it, or a case of them being lazy. Either way, bring it back to where they're going to remember it, and not come in the following week with the excuse that, oh, I forgot. What were those 2 notes again? What came after C? So it's got to be really simple and really easy for them. And I do know, you know, when you're sort of trying to work through skills, that it can feel like you're not making a lot of progress. But I'm all about foundation building, and I think it's better in the beginning to really build those foundations and get them solid on certain things, so they feel, you know, that they're not being overwhelmed. Because if you have this continuous situation where they're turning up each week forgetting what they did the week before, they don't really feel like they're going anywhere. They start to get confused and lost and not know what it's about. But if they can play something simple and really get it down, even if it's a couple of notes of a scale or a couple of notes of an arpeggio, that will be more satisfying for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think I know what the biggest problem for the guy was. Is that he says it's the same for everything he does. He just has this real inability to slow down. So
right.
Even if I've just stopped him the past 4 or 5 times and said, go slower, make sure you're just taking your time, look at each thing before you do it. Just like that. EFG! Oh, I missed the G.
I have a student like that, an older guy. I have an older guy, a student who just runs through everything at like lightning speed. So what I've had to start to do is just take the metronome and set it to like 50 or 60 and say, okay, you're playing every single note on that click, or every single chord change, or you're playing the whole song at that tempo, or maybe it's slightly faster than 50. Bring it down to like 60 or 80 or something. Say you're playing it at this tempo. So that works in his timing, as well as gets him to stop rushing, so he can start to work on the formation of the chords or the run or whatever. But he just tries to play everything at recorded speed or faster.
Yeah.
So I've said, okay, the new rule is you play to the metronome. And I try to get my students to play the metronome all the time, but he has been somewhat resistant. But now he's starting to see that by doing that, and by doing his his progressions and his chord changes and such to the metronome, that he's getting a lot better. It's improving his playing, so he's bought into it now.
Yeah. I actually tried to bring that in earlier on, but his timing is pretty bad, and I decided, that's the point at which I went for scales only. I thought I can do chords.
But if you get him working with the metronome, that will improve his timing.
He can't quite. We're not quite at the level. I think now, maybe if this week he's done a good bit of catching up since that kind of 4-week almost no practice, I think he'll be able to, if he's caught up to where he was before he left, we'll be able to bring the metronome in now. But I did try it earlier on, and he can either focus on the metronome and stay in time, or he can play the right notes on the way up and still get a little bit confused on the way down.
Have you had him just clap along with the metronome, not playing the guitar?
Clapping, he can generally get it. Strumming just downs, he can generally get it.
Right.
But when he brings the left hand in, even if it's just playing like rhythm lesson 1, exercise 5 with a chord, then a different chord.
So if you can play both the chords, if you just work on him doing clapping with the metronome, strumming, scratches to the metronome, plucking single notes to the metronome, walking up the strings to the metronome and back, just like that. One note on one string, not even a note, just plucking the string. Just getting him accustomed to the metronome over the course of maybe a month.
Yeah. Apart from the last one, I've done that.
I would find that all those problems will go away.
I wish they would, but that means it's too much. We've been doing too much jumping between. That's why I decided to just go for the scale, because I was trying exactly what you said for the first 3, just not that last one. But unfortunately, it was too much for them to remember to practice. I just mute it while our phone is just doing an Oz phone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool. We can. I do understand the situation, and you know, I'm really in the same boat as Bob there in my approach, in that it's all about bringing something back to the simplest element that possible. And if that's having your metronome clicking at 60 beats per minute and getting them to just clap every four counts, whatever it takes, you've got to bring them back to where they are, and you've got to say, well, this is your starting point. And you know, even if they can't clap to the metronome at that point, then you've got to do other things. I would get them walking, so they're walking in time, because people walk in time. Everybody walks in time. Nobody walks out of time. So it's very
remembering all of the timing specific stuff, because I've got an 8-year-old who's got not very good timing. It's just a matter of me deciding which one to go for first. I know you guys saying that you probably would have done just strumming before you did just scales.
Yeah. I think that really, you know, and again, what we're saying, or Bob has mentioned there, is really get them used to the metronome first. So whatever it takes to get them used to the metronome before
definitely always has one in time for the picking. There's no problem down and up, down, up in time with the metronome. It's adding anything complicated like the scale. If he has to think about another thing, doesn't matter what that other thing is, the timing just goes out the window. He can't focus on.
So lead me through the steps. So once he's picked down up on a string or on a single note, and let's say you're teaching the C scale, what's the next thing that you do?
Well, we tried then the E F top string.
Okay. Yeah.
Size 1 down up on that top string, and then
and that's where he loses it, right?
The timing goes a little bit out as he starts thinking about thumb position.
So get him to play 4 times on the E and then 4 times on the F instead of E F E F. It's too rapid for him. He's having to think every beat to move finger on off. So you see what I'm saying?
That's what I have been doing with people who haven't been having trouble with things like where to put your finger or how to hold it down. It's mostly just I decided the scales would probably be a good thing to gradually build that technique with, and then bring the timing in.
I mean, you're on the right track, Ben, and I know you know the answer to this, and this is probably just one of those students who's probably not quite getting it, but yeah, no, you're on the right track. But just this, I think the bottom line is simply. Keep bringing it down to a simpler thing. Keep thinking, okay, how can I make this simpler, or put another step in between. So from playing, just a single string to playing 2 notes, that was my obvious answer. There was to play 4 times on the E, 4 times on the F, and then go 2 times on the E, 2 times on the F. Until they can get it. So whatever it takes to bring it down to that. So.
Cool. I guess I was
cool.
after you were just talking to Paul about hiring and saying how this guy wasn't following the thing, and I was like, well, for these guys, I'm not really following the method anymore. I'm just teaching them a scale. But in this situation, that's fine as long as I gradually bring in the other skills.
Yeah, well, you are following the method, but you're doing it at a slower pace for these guys, and that's the method doesn't have a specific time to it. So. We're not saying, the real basis to G4 is it's something that there's not an exact strict way to do everything, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to lock you guys into saying these are the exact steps for teaching a skill or a scale or whatever. But what it is it's kind of like, well, we have a checklist, we know the goal, so we're very clear on where we're going, but there are different strategies for getting to that goal. And the idea is that we're talking strategy. And the same, again, you compare it to sport. The idea is to get the ball in the other guy's goal, but let's talk strategy, how we're going to get there. And different teams, different players, different coaches have different strategies. So you guys are open to, and I want you to encourage you to try different strategies and to talk different strategies. But what we're really doing is playing on the same team. We know where the goalposts are. And it was a funny description that was given for business, which I can apply to most teachers as well, is that to most businesses are like a football game, soccer as we call it, where there are no goalposts, so no one knows where they're all running around kicking this ball, but no one knows where the goalposts are, and that's basically there's no goal for most people in business. But I also see that with a lot of teachers. There's no actually clear goal of what are you trying to do, where are you getting the students, what's the end game here, and that's So your strategies, some of these strategies that we'll learn from you will be fantastic, and you'll teach us. Bob will teach us some. Paul, Shane, everybody will bring different strategies to the table. And I'm sure if I watch all of you, you'll have slightly different strategies and slightly different ways of doing things. None of them being right or wrong, just different in the way that you get to the goal.
Cool.
All right, so I'll just give Bob and Shane a chance to jump in here before we wrap up. But Bob, did you have any questions, comments, anything you wanted to talk about?
No, I really just wanted to hear about Paul's open day and how he approached that. I do have kind of just a funny aside. I've been out delivering flyers, and I just have to ask, how the hell do you guys go out and deliver flyers for like 4 hours and come back and teach? Because I come back and I am completely wiped out. I am sore and I'm knackered and I'm tired. I just don't
Grumpy. Angry. Don't give me any crap. You better practice, because I've been walking for 4 hours today.
I was out for like 4 hours yesterday. I came home and my feet hurt, my ankles hurt, and my knee hurt, and my thighs hurt, and my hips hurt, and my back hurt. I was asleep by 9:30. I woke up at 10:30 this morning.
Beautiful.
I was like, oh God, how am I going to do this?
Yeah, you do have to ease into it, I would say. In most cases, I would say do 2 hours to start with, and then, I mean, for the guys who are, in their 20s, I'm not in my 20s anymore, and I don't think you are either, Bob.
Nope.
But it's a bit easier for those guys. Their bodies are still pretty good. But what I found was that whenever I got back into doing it, you'd start off with 2 hours and then work up from there, and not even you don't want to do it every day either. You just want to. It's like anything. It's conditioning. You got to condition yourself into it and build up to it. So that would be my recommendation anyway.
Thank you.
Okay, Shane, have you got anything that you would like to ask? Is Shane there? Do we have?
Yep. Hi.
Yep,
I'm here. I think maybe this is one to bring up on Wednesday, but I mentioned to you that basically my smallest denomination is young beginners. I have one young beginner student. So, and about half, what did I work out? Like 40% of my students are senior adult guitar players. So that's the number one. But yeah, I think the young beginners is something I'm really missing out on. So just trying to work out how to get those guys in. But I appreciate it was very late for the hangout, so maybe it's one to bring up on Wednesday.
Yeah, maybe if you can join Wednesday, I can go into more depth. But I'll give you a couple of minutes and just sort of wrap it up there, because I just want to add one more thing before we go as well. With young beginners, I was fortunate because I had other things going on. In my first music school, I had a lot of different teachers there, so they would often be learning piano or violin or different things like that. So you tended to see more young students coming in. But then when I opened G4, the first G4 school, we were next to a piano school, but they were mostly running early development classes, so most of their students were actually 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. That was the majority of their students. They had these great morning classes, and it was, I don't know if it still is, but it was very popular in Australia, a few years back, to get your kid learning, from a young age, doing these early development programs. So if you want to get them in the door, what you probably want to do is run an early development program where they come in and bang some drums and shake some shakers and dance to some songs and all that sort of early development stuff. And if you find a teacher who could do it, if you look, even a student who's studying early childhood development and has a musical, I found that with the teacher in where I was in Sydney, that's what she had. She had a couple of young girls who were like, young 18, 19, 20-year-olds who were at university studying early childhood development or preschool education, and so they were, but they were also musicians, they were piano players, and so they were doing those classes. So I got a spin-off from that. But also a great way is siblings, and it's just talking to, if you've got students, I mean, what percentage of your students are aged between 12 and under? How many? What percentage?
It's I think like 25%. It was something like that. It was the second biggest one.
Okay.
So
right.
adults and then 12 and under. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So 12 and under. So there's going to be a certain percentage of those that are going to have siblings. They're going to have young siblings, and often it's just a matter of talking to them about, and I found that in the beginning when I first started doing the young beginners, and I got encouraged through a violin teacher to teach them, because she was a Suzuki violin teacher. This was years ago, and she said to me, what age do you teach? And I said, I don't start them until about 7 or 8. And she said, why so late? And I said, I don't know, they just don't seem ready before then. And then but it was actually two things that came together. It was her giving me advice that, she was starting them from 2 years of age, and she was telling me that they give them tapes to listen to when they're, from the day they're born, or even before they're born now, in the womb, they listen to the music on the tape. But I went to this seminar, which was conducted by a US professor. Her name's Frances Rasha. She's quite well known. She was kind of the one over the controversial Mozart studies and all that. She was involved in that. But she came to Sydney, and I met her, and then she did this workshop and so forth. And it was called Every Child's Right. And she talked about young children. Every young child should learn music, and not when they're 7 or 8, but from a very young age. She said that it's really beneficial in many ways, and it almost like it's a right that every child should learn music. They should have some musical ability, so then they have the choice to decide whether they go on with it later. Because a lot of children, and I know I was one of those children, where I didn't pick up an instrument really until I was in my early teens, and I felt so far behind the pace because I knew some guys who were like amazingly talented, and I couldn't even play a simple beat. But I wanted to be a musician, and yet here I was, really way behind the pace. It was like living in a foreign country where everybody spoke fluent Chinese, and I couldn't even put 2 syllables together. So she really made an impression on me about starting children early, and that's when I really started to get into it. But I became almost like an evangelist for children learning music, and I still am. I'm kind of at that mindset of every child should be given an opportunity to learn music. They may not know that they want to do it now, but when they get a bit older, they probably will want to do it. And even if they don't, well, they've still got the skill, and they can go on and do something else if they like. But to deprive a child of music and an education in music, I think is very sad. It's one of those things that I would like to see standard, that all children learn music. So once you sort of have that in you, and you have that fire, then you start to talk to parents about it, and they say, I've got a 3-year-old but too young, and so, well, you definitely get them into some early development class. And if you're teaching guitar from, say, 4, which is kind of what we put on our website, then you can say, well, go and do some early development and come back and see me when he or she turns 4, and we'll have a look and see how it goes on guitar. And you'll find you'll get the students, and once you get a few, they start telling their friends, because yourself, again, you got a young child, that parents of young children, they're big socializers, especially the mothers. They start to connect with the other mothers. They join mothers groups, and they go and hang out together and drink coffee and all the rest of it. So,
how do you think I should advertise for someone to teach a development class?
I would contact any of where they train them up, whether it be a college or a university, I would contact them and ask them, is there somewhere you can put up a billboard to advertise for teachers? Because you'll get one through there, no problem. The other thing is on Facebook. Facebook is brilliant. If you want to run a Facebook ad to target those kind of people, you just have to put in their interests. What are the interests of the people? One will be music, of course. The other will be young children. If there's certain colleges and universities where they go to, then you could put that on there as well. So you really target them. Their age is probably going to be between 19 and 24, 25 generally. For these students, if that's what if you target them. So it's very easy. It's very easy to target them. Just an example to give you guys is that I've been marketing for the Guthrie Govan masterclass for Trevor, and it's brilliant. It's just sale after sale after sale. He's got something like 40-something people attending now, and we've spent hardly anything on the marketing to get those numbers. And it's because it's highly targeted. It's only we only target people who like Guthrie Govan, and most people who like Guthrie Govan actually want to go and see him, and we're only targeting the area around London. That sort of, I think it's south of London, that area. So they're in the area, they like Guthrie, they see the ad, it's a no-brainer. And so when you do that kind of targeting, you find it very easy. It's different when targeting for guitar students, because it's a bit broader. It's not so narrow. When you're targeting for someone who likes a particular artist, and they're of a particular mindset and they like the idea of a masterclass, then it's very easy. And the same when you're targeting for childhood development. When you've got these cross points, that's when you get, if you've got 3 things that they have, it really narrows down the target market and you hit the right people. Your area, they have to like kids or be interested in teaching young child's education, and they are between a certain age, maybe they attend certain colleges and universities. You're going to target right down to those people, and it'll probably end up costing you cents for a click, and you might end up spending £50 and you'll get a good person. All right. I just want to add one more thing, Shane, and if you want to talk about this more, that we can go into it more on Wednesday. Happy to do that. What I was going to add here is just to think about, and you don't need to give me any answers now, but just generally to think about, is that I'm putting together a whole new marketing materials. So it'll have your posters, your flyers, things like Facebook headers, cover. A couple of other things in there that you can use for your marketing. But just if you have any ideas for things that you want done, it's all done in the new font, and the way that I've set it up, it's very easy now. So instead of me having to go and manually put all your names and things in, I just go to your card and it just prints it all up in one click. So if you want to kind of customize in different ways and different shapes, then that might not be so easy. But as far as having this whole set of marketing materials, then it's easy. So is there anything that if you guys, you don't have to say now, but if there's anything you think about that you can think of that you would like someone mentioned an A-frame design today, so I've made up an A-frame design there as well. So he's got that design, but anything else you can think of, a sign of a certain size or a brochure or anything, then we can make it up as a template, so that way it's very easy for me to print it out and give you all a copy. That's it for today. It was a good one. We got through quite a lot of information there. Thanks, guys. And if you want to drop in on Wednesday, you're quite welcome. Same time, same channel. Until then, have fun. Thanks.
Cheers, Alex. See you later.
Thanks.
See you, Bob.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Good night, guys.